Hey everybody, how are you guys doing? I'm Eric Airlock, and this is another talk on philosophy, logic, and what is logic, what is talk, and what is thinking, all together, interwoven or not. I've given two talks so far, breaking a past lecture into two different talks, which are in the lecture notes, as a run up to why we should look at logic from a broader, a more Wittgensteinian, and a more multicultural point of view, perhaps you could say, is a lot of the talk and the two. So, this is more of a specific talk about ideas I've been working with lately. And cats. Again, I try to work with them. They work as much as they ever do, or punch a clock, you know? And they don't. So, basically, logic is about talking and chaining words together. Now, how do we do all of that? And I am going to show what I like to present as a more Wittgensteinian view of how that works, and it's almost a British empirical view in ways. It's almost kind of an Indian view in ways. I've been influenced by a lot of different things. But without getting into realms of all kinds of complexity that would be hard for the average person to understand, and here I don't mean I'm smart or you're smart or the experts are smart or not, I mean that it just would take us out of understanding how magnesium sulfate works into your life is for a chemist and not for everyone. And if people do say scientific literacy, it's like, well, yes, but also no. It's not important for all of us to freak out about magnesium sulfate. That's for hopefully a few people to figure out plenty. But that's kind of pragmatics, you know? It's like Lewis Carroll says, most of the folks aren't going to get, if you have 10,000 people to build a wall, it's not going to go up in a moment because most people can't get near the thing. Which is a thing I meant to bring up in the last two lectures and did not. The wall problem, which is a wonderful practical versus abstract sort of problem Lewis Carroll himself considered. When we think about a Wittgensteinian, think about a wall, just like that. Lewis Carroll is very much like Wittgenstein in saying, no, don't think about the wall as an equation. Think about the wall as a wall that also can be plenty in the ways we make it or pass it through as or hook it up with equations. Think about it more like that, and you will see how math lives in the real world, like I peripherally see my cats. Again, cannot reach the squid. Always ideal. Le petit Auger. Yes, and cat is not French even. Very talented. So, basically this is a talk. I have often been saying I do believe that perception, memory, which is also imagination, but that's not just images, and emotions are all interwoven to make the situations that we deal with in life. But logic is a subject that deals with words. And also everything else. In a certain sense, you can think about if we only focus on words or equations of words, what Wittgenstein's work is pointing towards is that there are regular-ish and more or less regular ways that words are woven into practices and forms of life. Those themselves he sort of called language games, but you can think about, as some have said, Wittgenstein calls everything language games. Technically, he talks about things that are worded or involve words as language games, and then that's the subset of games that involve language. So if you think about everything as games or forms, then language forms or games are part of our lives. Not all of it, because you have feet and hands and cats and sounds of the plunk to the floor and lower neighbors, possibly still. It couldn't have happened so quickly, one way or the other. That's not in this town anyway. If you are interweaving several things together, and emotions and words and thoughts and memories, and forethoughts, which are a sort of arranging your memories as imagination, as thoughts, you can feel heat or not. I'm going to talk through this slower here, through the notes. We're interweaving several basic things we expect others to share with us as pieces of thought and our reality, and you enter into situations where you weave certain simple pieces together with others or not. Part of that is words, and logic is something like how do you use words to state or argue correctly in situation. This is the part formal logic tries to specifically cut out. Last talk I was talking about formal logic and why it isn't good enough for the real world. A Wittgensteinian view, I am showing you what I present as a very simplified, my own personal, Wittgensteinian kind of philosophy, which is a bit Buddhistic, because I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not religious. But at the same time, inspired by Indian thought and other thoughts, I do, and a lot by Taoism and Zen, but also Greek thought plenty. it does seem like there's several basic things. Zen koans are just about this as much as Wittgenstein as Poe's detective stories, and I will get through all of that, and Lewis Carroll as we work along. But thought is typically, if we want to say what is thought and what is logic, I am going to describe what is a somewhat reasonable, common explanation, not a neurological explanation, because that's for people who deal with neurons. And if you don't, then you don't, which is great. And as much as expertise may or may not be publicly available in your life. So there are experts who deal with neurons, that's great. We always do, sort of. But I don't really deal with my brain, thankfully. What I do deal with is, in a certain sense, my eyes, my mind. I see things, I think about things. And this is for the average person. Again, just like I don't know much about magnesium sulfate, and I hope I don't have to. And I hope that experts are being supported in ways that I don't, and then can if there's an article available. In the same way, I can go on and nerd out on Wittgenstein and Buddhism a lot. But the thing is, I'm boiling it down for you in this talk because I'm trying to communicate ideas and the overall frame of how logic and thought seem to work, which is a very broad subject. But the best way you would do that, as Wittgenstein says, is give as many concrete examples and situations as possible and show what are the similarities and differences that are going on here. So not only are we going to go through thought and go through the world and say, okay, this is Greek thought, this is Indian thought, Chinese thought. Technically, we always go India, Greece, China, because those are the golden ages slightly in order overlapping. And then, with possible crossover all over the place, possibly not. And as we have those similarities and differences, not only in philosophy, but what is specifically called argumentative logic, which is the part of philosophy, all of philosophy is arguing or not, or just shutting up and staring at things, and then arguing even more, because those things seem to feed back into each other a lot in the Buddha and everybody else who's after him and other schools. That we interweave several pieces together, and we are interweaving several cultures of thought together to see what logic and talk and thought is, if I can do it purty one day. So, as the child talks out and learns at 2 and 3 to be like the horse goes in the barn, the child learns to add words to perception, emotion, and imagination to create memory, imagination, to create to weave themselves into situations that are already interwoven. Heidegger says thrownness, like a game. Yes, a game of life, a game of thrownness. I will show myself out. That you have several pieces woven together, like terrible jokes, interwoven hopefully with a fact or two, something halfway's agreeable. And if you're staring through the mind, how can you not? That if logic and thought are several things interwoven, thought may be wordless at times because you could feel about this or that, an object in front of you, and that is a bit of a thought. We could say or not, but we then say here what thought is or isn't with words. And that's what I'm doing with you. A lot. But I'm also making facial expressions, I'm using a tone of voice, I can't help all of that. The Pitaha use bird calls, and other things in creative ways in speech. I'm not going to do that, I already have enough annoying jokes as it is. But as it is, and I don't think that, they probably use that to tell jokes as well. Not each and every time, though. That's not the Jaguars. But basically, interweaving Jaguars and words, which Jaguars are objects, and then you have words, which are also objects, but special word objects that are not like Jaguars. We just sail them through the air. Thankfully, that's not Jaguars at each other all day long, and then back and forth reflect them in our heads. Emotionally, notice how you can pay attention only to the words and only to my words and not to your own emotions. Now I want you to pivot back to your own emotions and feel how you feel right now, okay? Probably that things fit and don't, fluctuations of tense and calm and good and bad. Now I want you to go back to my words and just pay attention to my words right now, right? In a certain sense, the mind is several things overlapping, and then your point of attention, what you pay attention to, I am actually using words to point to, and I snap you in, such that I can use words to point to parts of your mind that are all overlapping and interwoven right there, and your brain and mind is something that can actually, in a certain sense, always have the interwoven in a situation and then jump from thing to thing. I very much like, there are now in psychology it shows the point of vision moving around a painting, and it isn't that everybody's vision starts at A and goes to B and goes to C. And it's a very good Wittgensteinian model of thought, although thought is not just visual. Because imagine part of the painting is the visual, part is audible, and other things. It's all going on at once. It's all peripherally, and you're experiencing the painting all at once, but you're actually going around the painting from thing to thing to thing, just like I'm saying word to word to word, and you're paying, hopefully, attention, attention, attention. or not, and then you talk to yourself. That's what I do, and then come back to these words. That is your mind sinking in and out amongst a bunch of things, and that's the attention span. That's very much the monkey to the elephant, as the Buddhists say. But I will go on, and I'm going to talk out now kind of what I was spinning together there with a more careful lecture, but that is the presentation of a Wittgensteinian picture of mind more so. It's several diverse elements, including all of the physical objects around you that you're paying attention to and using, and then thinking is any interweaving of emotions with objects, with memory, imagination, and then which comes from the things and your experiences. And then you also have a strange kind of hybrid being that we use in orally and then in text, which is a weird way of reweaving basic elements into a whole other alien form to itself, weirdly, and yet so much the same. Words. And oddly, again, I wonder how much text, once we all have enough YouTube and we can see each other's faces, how much will we use text and for what is a good thing to consider. I actually myself, we all have different attention spans. I definitely, of course, enjoy talking things back and forth. When I am reading a long text, I have to space out and think a lot. And that could affect, forms of media text in the future. I have found a lot of course, I am trying to keep a careful text. I have the inclination to try to keep the text of the notes together with the talk. But I also now am increasingly just letting myself talk off the notes and letting it all just hang together as talk rather than trying to keep a careful text. And that kind of thing, where it's just basic, simple elements interwoven in a slightly different way, could have a very different effect in many different ways. And that it's all there, you would just shift it so slightly and shifting from one to the other, much like the mind would shift from one to the other. This is visual, this is audible. Now it's visual and audible. Again, David Lynch video is visual plus audio, image plus audio. You're like, yes, it is, you professional wonderful crazy man. And yes, it's like flip, 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 flip. Okay, this is the same. Now this is different. Now this is the same. Now this is the same. What happened? Mind and frame. Snaps faster than thought. Fastest thing is mind. The Muslims say thought is fastest. But of course, they mean as far as we would move, I think. Of course, mind, I am sure, for the Muslims, is not only fast, instantaneous. The thing is that it's all regardless of your theological beliefs. And I do like religion and logic and all of this all together. And let's remember algebra for a moment. We're pausing to bask in the certainty and the growth of algebra and math, You feel how true 2 plus 3 equals 5 is? Man, it's just like seeing it again for the first time this summer, isn't it? How much do you sit around basking in facts that are true? Does it feel some sort of way? What? The interesting thing is mind is the snap, and then with mind there is thought. So what's happening is your mind is always weaving many things together, and thought can take you through it with motions. But the thing is the mind always snaps with many things. I'm going to take us very slowly through this kind of view again here, and then I am going to be going. You can watch my talks on Indian and Chinese philosophy a bit. I added Sun Tzu to the talks, as mentioned. But I'm going to be talking about a bit more, I've got more Aristotle a bit to do. And then I've got some, again, Poe and Carroll and some other things to weave all this together with. And yeah, I think it will be good, the series of talks, because there's a lot that you can simply show people with simple words. And people tend to use too many syllables, and the Buddhists do say people overthink things too much. The Taoists say people rush past the simplest of things on the street to get to the fancy things in the shops, and they do not stop and pay attention to things right there on the street. So if we are reweaving words in together with other things, and we say this dog looks like that other dog out loud to somebody else or silently to yourself, you are in a sense weaving emotions and things and imaginations and others. And you're like, oh no, the dog I saw last week, like this perceived dog right here, we can just do that. So snap. Why? Well, because I tried to do this as a kid. I did again and again. My folks encouraged me. And then now it's a snap. And now I do this endlessly. Of course, I'm going to die, so I can't do this endlessly. But just the same way, I can do this endlessly. Mind snaps back and forth. The Zen say that's snapping to the middle, where things could be continuous, and you snap off at the end the birth and the death, and you have the continuous. Like when you look at a circle. So there's beginnings and endings, or birth and death, as the Zen say, and then they want you to see. You can actually cut, as the Irish joke goes, someone has cut off the end of this rope. Maybe it's even a circle. That'd be even better. You know what I mean? It'd be even better if the Irish dude did that to screw with the Brits. By which I mean the Irish, you know? So, if you do entangle with my jokes, with these terrible things, notice my jokes, of course, are entanglements of many different things, the lecture material, and then I pop it off silly, and then can come back to a different emotional state with the same, which would be the serious. And actually, if the silly and the serious, like Wittgenstein says, it would be the difference that highlights the difference, because you can't see same without two things. You see two guys, you can see tall and short. You see one guy, can't see tall or short, right? So you can see same and you can see different. This is the same, and now this is different. See, the thing is that your mind goes without hiccup either way. That is mind, and then me taking you through it with words, with thought. Which is, as this is verbal, and I'm not flashing murals and being like, Diego Rivera, look over here. No. Diego Rivera sadly has passed. So what I would tell you instead is I'm taking you through moves of what is already in your mind and your world. Did I teach you any of these words of English? No. Sadly, your parents got to you first. With all of these pieces that are conditioned into you, such that turtles are turtles here, and then in China, yes. That snap, you can actually think around and through. And that is probably a better Wittgensteinian definition of what philosophy is than anything else. And so, in logic, what we are doing from a Wittgensteinian formal, informal, that would be early, later, Wittgenstein plenty, Frege, early Wittgenstein, then later, and capiche, is what we are doing is we are working through different ways of interweaving thought. That was argument for ancient people, for the Indians and the Greeks and Aristotle and the Chinese and the school of names. It's argument and lawyering good. And then it is specifically the part in India, Greece, and China where logic talks about argumentation and segmenting things, articulation. The French, they drop their consonants. I don't trust them. Is that articulation is, of course, breaking things apart into pieces. Well, why would you break something apart into pieces? Because things are densely interwoven. We practice them, so we pick them apart. As Wittgenstein says, it's only when the machine breaks down that you can see how the pieces work. It's only when we do philosophy, he says, you're like, that is a tree. And if somebody's walking by, gives you a weird look, Wittgenstein says, this man is not insane. He is merely practicing philosophy. Normally, you walk right by a tree. It's a tree. Snap. You can actually, as a human being, stop and say, is that a tree? In ancient world, the ancient world in text around the campfire, people are like, whoa, are you like what? And like, yeah. And then you can keep talking with them or not. It is very useless. It is very useful. It would be the full gambit, of course. In fact, oddly enough for Wittgenstein, language goes on holiday because it would only be in the difference that you would actually be able to see how the pieces work. You stand far back on holiday, you see, oh my God, what am I doing at my job? Because you're on holiday. You're out of the situation. There's a good Zen koan story. Guy goes up a mountain, he gets wonderfully enlightened. This is, I think, in Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. He wanders down the mountain, somebody bumps him, and he gets all pissed. That's the end of the story, tip your savior. That's it. And so it's, again, well, if you're all enlightened on the mountaintop, that's one situation. You're all down from the mountain in the marketplace. That's another, isn't it? So again, the Zen do say, so who's really enlightened here? You know what I mean? Where's the guy? You know what I mean? Well, isn't there anymore, So in all of that, as Wittgenstein says, if we are looking at a dog and thinking a dog thinks, what we're doing is looking over the dog's behavior, like my cats, actually. I got both of them, either side here. See how I see the one and not the other, but see both, with the arrangement? Well, with all of that, and tracing one's mind through things, as you can see all of it simultaneously, and now you can't. On cue. You can hear, actually, the other, though. That in the interweaving of all of these things, if you see a dog interweave in reality in ways that you just find yourself snapping into, you're like, but I just snap into feeling that other English users or Chinese behavior when I can't talk to them just is my own mind and behavior. Your mind is set up to snap into sharing turtles with China, so it's like, but turtles are turtles. And you just sort of, you can't get thinking like a butter knife into that. I mean, but that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to snap. You share situations with others, but the wonderful thing about wizards is, not that I'm the only one, the wonderful thing about thought experiments, detective stories, wonderlands is that you can pull things out of formation and reweave them like a sheep knitting many, many, many pairs of knitting needles. You can weave like the mind, which is more the elephant. Interweave, wham, slowly building. You slowly, wham, interweave everything with needles with your mind, and then other of your mind, thought, can make motions like Alice slowly. But from the point of view of Alice, of course, all the interweaving would be weirdly instantaneous and from every time and space, because in a certain sense, principle or universal or whatever is that direction would be profoundly for Poe from each and everything. So once you make a move any kind of way, it would seem like it's everywhere, somewhat mind at once. This is also why Wittgenstein does not want, and this is very Zen, there's a lot of Zen to this, that you don't talk about the mind as if it's an inner mental state, and you do not talk about language or emotion as if it is an inner mental state. Language and emotions are not inner mental experiences. Have you ever seen anybody upset? Have you ever been upset and then been like, oh, I'm getting all upset, and people can see it, and like not said those words to yourself, but your attention has and your mind has wandered exactly in that direction? I would imagine that would be common to all of us. And then we also be like, hey, calm down, you're being a jerk. Or not so many words, maybe too few. But given all of that, that's not an inner, in the same way I didn't inwardly invent any words of English. I heard them from outside. I learned it by watching you, Dad and Mom and everybody and the doctor, I guess, and, the friends and family, as I blame everyone else for my problems. But really, as we snap backwards in denial to this, and that ain't no river in Egypt again, that essentially you're interweaving many elements, as my speech and diction do too much. You've seen too much. You interweave too many elements together, and then your mind does it one at a time. Can you listen to two different words at once? No. Can you listen to yourself talk while I talk? No. That is because your mind is geared up to listen to one voice and word at a time, and that there's logic as best as it, from a pragmatic way, performs in the world. From a positivist viewpoint, it is whatever follows the right rules. But from a Wittgensteinian point of view, and the reason that I'm doing this sort of Buddhistic Wittgensteinian thing, is what Wittgenstein says is, no, you don't understand. The words are interwoven with everything else, and the structure of logic is not an inner component to logic. That's like trying to find the meaning of 2 within the symbol of the number 2 in the higher part rather than the lower part. You would see the thing in context. And actually, that would be, you'd only see it with multiple things like 2 guys, tall or short, in difference. With difference, you would see it. That would be when you could see the snap of mind as well as thought, and how mind and thought work together in all of meaning and reality, which is what Zen and philosophy and Wittgenstein are all about. I now thus am talking about truth very much as if truth is often very much words, not entirely, but very much. You can flip people off, as Wittgenstein said. I won't do that for you right now. I may feel ornery later, but truth is often words, but meaning is everything. The thing is, meaning is the snap and the thought, and sometimes the thought and the tune is put to words. So actually, truth and lies are words, but think about how true a turtle is, and you don't have to say turtle to yourself. And that is a very Wittgenstein point of view. A positivist would more have to say, how do I talk? Where is there a structure of words such that I have knowledge about turtles? Wittgenstein would say, most of the time when you interact with turtles, hopefully you're not being very verbal at all, nor need to, and then you are when there's problems. This is very Heideggerian. But you don't need to otherwise. You are as verbal towards turtles as you need to be, and in a certain sense that's being logical with turtles even as you haven't fully been logical with turtles or fully talked out what it is to be with turtles, because why would you? Again, I keep having to say, how dare you? You can't. That's like me describing ahead of time that this is going to be a snap. Wait a minute, guys, I'm going to try to make this not a snap. Damn it. I can't. That was a snap in ancient China for me too. I feel annoyed. Well, that's just useless, isn't it? As the Zen say, you're not going to lift your leg up. Why? Because you can't lift your leg above your leg. So how high can you lift mind? Well, you can't. So I guess happy's going to be happy, sad's going to be sad. I'm going to concentrate very hard on making my happiness happier than Sumerian's happiness next week. I'm going to arrange an elaborate, I'm going to call it science. I'm going to arrange it's sort of Sumerian, but it's different. And then I'm going to arrange all of it mechanically. I mean, that's Sumer, but it's different. And then that's going to be probably happiness, probably, I guess. Who can say, though? I can't. So, do we or the dog need words to change our mind from one thing to another? Sort of. And notice, words are free, so I can use them a lot, which means you can go wander around and look at a tree, but I could say tree and point you right at one, or all of them. And that is a lot of power with each and every word, because it snaps. Now that you mention trees, it's changed the frame. Now there's another object on the table. Think of it simultaneously as the frame, the mind, and the thought is both. The objects on the table and the objects on the table frame the table and the situation by being present in view. Also, what is peripheral, or even off the table specifically, can frame things. But things are actually also framed specifically by the objects in view. How many arrangements of 3 objects are there on a table? I don't know. So I don't know how logical an arrangement on the table can be. It would depend on the purposes, as Wittgenstein would say. Once you're in the forest, you can hear the tree fall and there's a sound. If you're not, you have to, in a certain sense, remain agnostic. You don't know if anybody was there and there's a sound or not. If you don't hear a dog whistle, you're not in circuit with it. It isn't a dog whistle to you. Could be. You'd have to think about it or hear it in words afterwards. It's the same with the object on the table. There isn't a logical arrangement. It would be, what is it doing with other things, and how much are you paying attention to and feeling or caring about? And that would depend on how strategic in any way with words or everything else, including placing physical objects on the table, you could possibly be. So the debate actually rages on. Now, in logic, what I am doing is I am providing what I am hoping is a solid, simple worded basis for a Wittgensteinian point of view. But actually, analytic philosophy, which dominates major universities and departments, very much insists that logic is in a certain way principled or has form to it. Now, and then I actually, in my philosophy of language textbook, it actually says, Wittgenstein went too far and then ... crickets. I love that. Again, that's more work to do. So, I mean, it doesn't say ... crickets. That's like in Monty Python. It doesn't say it. No, look, it's like, it's like, no. But, yeah, there's a lot of crickets after what are the rules of logic. It's like, well, there's formal logic and stuff. Yes, but the reason Wittgenstein goes too far is because he's basically describing what I'm describing now. It's not that there's rules of logic. There's regular uses of words that are often successful. And without that regularly in your life, mistakes would not make any sense in context. And context here is a fancy word for whatever the heck is all around you as the situation. Just context is not outside anything. It is what is in front of you. It's just what's in front of you as it's in front of you. And context is often talked of as an exterior frame. Well, again, it's what is and isn't on the table, so it's not really exterior entirely to what's on the table. Rather than, and similarly, you think about and with the objects on the table, with your memories of objects that used to be on the table, which would be things being off the table specifically, and then also are emotional about that with others, reading others' emotions and trying to coordinate practices with them. That is the Wittgensteinian point of view. From a more, the viewpoint that Wittgenstein was opposed to in his earlier work, Frege somewhat, although, again, that's wonderfully historical and debatable exactly what Wittgenstein is and isn't precisely saying like and unlike Frege, but that's worth getting into. We will. You can talk about logic as if it's crystalline operations of math. That's what Lewis Carroll was afraid of a bit in Boole. He mocks it, I think, in The Mad Hatter. I will describe this stuff later in the talks, in a few. But what is going on with all of that is that Lewis Carroll knew that there were logicians in his day trying to formulate logic into math. After Lewis Carroll's day, along came a guy, sort of actually in his final years, named Frege. I don't believe that Lewis Carroll would have or been familiar with Frege. In fact, he died about the year that I think he and Nietzsche died about 1900. Frege is publishing his work, and it's getting known at all right around that year, so it might have slipped right by, and passed. And in German, Lewis Carroll. And for Victorians, the Brits are still sort of the only smart people and then aren't and then are for themselves. So you can't teach if you're anything other than Anglican, not Germans, that's Lutheran. That's the final form of culture for Hegel. That's another whole logic, So with all of this, Lewis Carroll is afraid, they're going to make logic into math. Well, I'm going to screw with kids' emotions and show emotions as moves of chess on a board because I think logic is emotional. I think that logic is moves of emotion, and I am going to present, I hope very well, it's going to be what it is, and others will feel about it this way and that. It all goes the same place in the end, though, kind of like the Tea Party. Essentially, Lewis Carroll looks like he is following, to me, Edgar Allan Poe, of whom he knows. Edgar Allan Poe's detective stories, which were inspirational for Sherlock Holmes to be a guy, ever, anywhere, not here though. I keep looking for him, like the Rhino, for Wittgenstein. And I'm going to call Dupin, and I'm going to call it Dupin, not Dupin. I'm going to call it Dupin because I do think the pun Dupin, he is duping people. So I'm just going to call Poe's detective Dupin from now on, and I know, and he expects his American audience to pronounce it similarly, though he's from the South, so he expects them to pronounce it differently from me, but you get it. That as people are, that Poe understands and says you have to be a poet and a mathematician to be brilliant. He says that's real logic, that's logic in the real world. Carroll, looking at that, poetry and math, seems to follow Poe and thinking you have to be both a poet and a mathematician to be a logical genius. And Poe apparently got drunk more than once, stood on a pool table, and lectured everybody in the bar about how he was a genius. Lewis Carroll, I think, had a different tack and sailing of the ship. But he quietly played with little girls in what critics say is, many question, but seems to be, decent ways. He is trying to figure out, and he wants to send pictures of children's emotions to Darwin. He wanted to send, he's like, there's pictures of ape emotions and stuff, and like ape face. Think about it, I have been a lot of facial expressions. I think a lot about facial expressions because Poe says, you're at a card game, you're reading people's faces. Think about how emotions, words, objects, and memories are all interwoven as thought and playing a card game, and how you're reading people. And what Poe says is that is logic. He has his detective Dupin say, and that's why most people ain't Sherlock Holmes, because I'm smarter than the cops in science, he effectively says, because I'm also a poet, not just a mathematician and a code maker. And then you have Lewis Carroll playing with children's emotions, hopefully, in fiction, in which he is positioning, he also liked freaking out little kids, who doesn't, and he's positioning children on boards with emotions, at least one, with other childlike characters. Emotions in the Red and White Queens is back and forth, it very much seems, emotional states. And all that's logic, as Tweedledum, who's a bit emotional himself and in a battle, says to Alice. This is Tweedledee. But if I'm mistaken, it effectively comes out, again, the same way. Make fewer mistakes, making mistakes. It is life, dear fellow. All of it, again, can come out. You'll feel very much the same way in the end. But hopefully this shows you a thing or two about logic, because actually what Poe and then Carroll and then Wittgenstein are doing, and I do love Poe to Carroll to Wittgenstein, is they're using things like simple situations to show how objects and emotions and words, also thus memories, because we have to remember what we do not see or hear. Wittgenstein says, what does the sound of a clarinet sound like? Can you come up with that in paragraphs? You would not. Did anybody train you to come up with the sound of a clarinet in paragraphs? Should we turn to experts? It's like the sodium magnesium thing. I hope not. We could. Back window's always open for Wittgenstein. We could. I hope not. That would be laborious, What's going on is we are interweaving things together all the time as thought from these sources, and we can actually, the easiest way of saying, but that's what we're doing, is to simply use language as I am with you to pivot back and forth between examples which show you differences and similarities, which would be the only way you can point your mind, which you don't have to do alone with words, you can use gestures. I won't right here. Again, would you like to see my collection of off-color Italian hand gestures? No, you don't. Again, this is, we're keeping this decently legal here. So, unlike Italy. What we're doing here is we're interweaving I'm weaving history into things, children, and occasionally it's emotional. What I'm doing is I'm weaving several simple things together continuously, and you are simultaneously hearing words, having emotions, seeing things, like my face or not, or whatever you're paying attention to as you listen to this. And then you also can remember things like, that was history in France and stuff. It was the 80s, And you can interweave that, and I can confidently talk as if you can interweave that, and neither you nor I can pay attention to it because it is instantaneous. At least the part of it that I can rely upon and you do, and how would I rely upon it or not? So I can talk purdier or not, I can make moves in logic like Alice, but in a certain sense, it would all be interwoven by the snap, and you can take your way around it and through it. And that would be very much Wonderland. I'm not saying this is exactly what Lewis Carroll was thinking, but Poe and Carroll and Wittgenstein allow you to screw with and rearrange the pieces with fictions and jokes, and that is why I tell a lot of jokes. Let's hope. Enough. Yes, I'll try to tell more, I swear. While you can interweave things with people, you can do it better or worse, wiser or more foolish. That's no guarantees you won't be hit by a bus. I don't know of perfect prediction or prophecy, but there's better and worse weaving of words. Most people across cultures appreciate that as wisdom, or at least the gift of gab for the Irish. And what that means is there's wider talk and wider perspective or not. Now there's the snap and then there's the moves of thought. So that means the snap is the snap for you and I. A turtle is a turtle to the dim-wittest of people. If I get Alzheimer's in my 90s, maybe push on, I'm going to be 130s. And then I'm like, how quick? Snap. I don't remember who I am. But I don't think when I have Alzheimer's, this is going to take a while. It may take a while for me to get my fingers in order. It may take a while for me to remember who I am. I don't know how quick a snap's going to sound like a snap, maybe it'll be like, it's 3 seconds. There it is, you know what I mean? It's like with the planes. Probably not. Probably no matter, on into your eldest of age. See? It's because it's instantaneous. What are you going to do? Get in front of it? You going to slow down enough? No. From our point of view, it would be instantaneous. You couldn't slow it down more or less. It's again like saying the turtle's slow but quickly. No. The turtle's neither slow quickly nor slowly. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying heat got hotter this summer. I don't know what that is. I can't. And we just talk as if the Chinese couldn't. That's very profound if you stop and think about it. But you'd have to stop and say silly examples to think about it. In fact, the sillier the example, often, the better it stands out. Which would be, like a simple example, the better it stands out. So before we get into words, and why does this snap so much? Well, early in life, babies develop object permanence. In spite of the brute fact that sound is used as an example in Indian thought. People probably were around the campfire able to clap their hands, sound of one hand clapping, snap their fingers. I've taken to the finger snap. Also because I couldn't do this as a baby, but now I do it continuously. And it's the same every time. It's also different. Watch. But watch, it's the same. You learn to do that before you learn words as a baby in the womb and then out. And then you're hearing words. I like Gopnik. I'm not going to say, and people do or don't know words here. Let's just leave all that hazy and foggy with ragged edges, as Wittgenstein says. But let's say that about the time you're 2 or 3-ish, you often snap into words such that the horsey goes in the barn and you're doing what I described in the last lecture. Now that means in the womb and then out of it. We're not going to do rebirthing here. I'm going to leave that to the Wiccans, in this town. Again, they are professionals. I am not. So again, you take your life into your own hands with that. So all of this, you basically have here that as children, we're learning a permanent object is an object and a snap is a snap. And now late on into your 90s, you're like, well, let's turn on the radio. It's like, that doesn't exist anymore, But a snap is still a snap. Even if you can't move your fingers so much because of the arthritis, the diabetes. But I do it for you. There it is. And again, I would say no matter how racist anyone is, in old home and nursing homes or not, yeah, but here, that's still a snap in ancient China. Doesn't matter. That's how people share things, and feel completely differently about it. Because this is a snap in ancient China. You can't stop it. It's instantaneous. And how you feel about that or what it means in China to snap at a waiter or not or here, now those are motions of thought. And your emotions take you quickly into it, but of course there's the snap first and then as. I will talk a little bit. I like the book Are We Born Racist? That is very much how racism works, which I do work into the notes here. But I do like talking about racism, and I don't labor it because I know you have to leap around and not make too many jokes about anything because, of course, then that's laborious, isn't it, on people's emotions. You can jump in and out, and then it's okay. It's like stand-up comedy. Tell 3 jokes about women, you're probably a jerk. So, essentially, with this kind of thing, but women like laughing at women someday, yes, all day long. So, given that, the Buddhists say, if you think about something too much, you're obsessed. That's bad. Thinking about things isn't bad. Being obsessed is bad. So telling too many jokes about women is typically bad no matter who you are. You get what I mean? It's not that telling, jokes is always be responsible and nice to people. Please be nice, But no, telling too many, it's like I don't know of any comedian who could possibly get away with that unless they also made like the strain the part of the joke, which of course could just be right there for you. It'd be low-hanging fruit because it exists, but as a form of the thing right in front of you, you could pivot to. But again, that would not be me or this routine. What's going on with the Are We Born Racist stuff is actually your parents or everybody around you and their parents' react towards people in certain ways. You learn a lot of those reactions of fear towards other specific people, and you soak that up and people's reactions, even watching, you could say, like, sitcoms that are somewhat like real life. You would see people's reactions. You would learn to react to certain sorts of people or not, and then your parents would tell you things or not. So obviously, you could have seriously racist parents who tell you a bunch of terrible things about South Koreans. North Koreans, they're okay. It's again, why do Guatemalans secretly move my car every Thursday? They're insane. But at the same time, your parents don't have to take you to Klan rallies or tell you anything. If they react towards Latinx people a certain way, and I love my parents, I don't think they're terrible people at all. But insofar as we share the zeitgeist or not, and we don't entirely, equally, that would be snapping into behavior, and it would be invisible. Unless you saw the difference. Unless you took yourself through the difference, and then you could see it immediately, like the tall and short guy. But without it, it would just be, what you stare through every day, Well, as I think a band said, I can't go no higher, But again, I will return to sober thought, because I can't see any of that nor talk through it right now. So basically, we are conditioned with babies as we are learning words, and words become words. So in that sense, you are actually, and no, I don't mean racism is absolutely permanent. It does mean, as Are We Born Racist suggests, we're all going to be somewhat kind of conditioned, whatever this is. But if the elephant lumbers slowly, and if you can jump the monkey around in the Buddhist metaphors, well, then you know how to slowly layer yourself, a bit more. You couldn't do it intentionally, but you could position yourself to slowly grow. And then, like this, it becomes a snap. Like the objects on the table, framing, Phrasing, and I will continue. So if I say door, that puts you in a situation. Not one, not two, a range in a certain sense, but it's not really a range. It only is once you articulate it and connect it to things. But it already mentioned several things in mentioning a door, actually. There's a behind it. There's an in front of it. When you see this hand, there's a behind it and in front of it without words. This isn't just solid. This is empty, solid, empty. And this is empty, this is empty. Your mind does all of that. That is the snap. Object permanence is not just the permanence of the object. It's the difference of the object from everything around it. So, empty, solid, empty, snap. So the thing is, I say, look at that. You're like, wow, I can do that. Yes, because your mind is already there. And so I say, well, look beyond that. Look at the wall behind me. Your mind snaps, and then it doesn't. That, again, what I'm doing is there's several things that snap in together, that interweave together. And what I am doing is I am pointing you with words towards one or the other thing which is already interwoven there. Think about the social implications of that. I don't. I stare right through it. Again, I come from, well, not a land down under, but, it's a bit scary. Snow and ice and, I guess, Yetis, you know what I mean? So it's hard for, my people to see any of that. You get what I mean? Sort of like, I don't know, there's somebody driving horses around a mountain. There's like 6 of them, and it's a mountain or something, So it's real hard to see the tip of the iceberg. You know what I mean? I can rely on the snap and not say things, kind of like the Irish. Again, they have yet to see the sun. So, I do always love the onion piece. Again, the fake newspaper, not the fruit. We are going to form a more perfect onion here out of all of this, is that the Irish see strange, large, yellow UFO in the sky. You know what I mean? I have no idea what I'm talking about. I can leave all that unmentioned. But I did, didn't I? But I did leave it unmentioned there. So early in life, babies develop all of this, snap into it. That's memories, imagination, emotions. In a certain sense, you can debate, and I think it's very good to debate with Gopnik and others. I don't talk to her personally. She is actually in this town. How much do we know we have emotions or know? I mean, a baby certainly feels. Think about a baby crying, as soon as, out the thing, that out the damn Gina, yes, is that basically the baby's screaming, so you're emotional in the womb, out of the womb, you're kicking people, you know what I mean? At least one person, and yeah, essentially you're having emotions, but how much do you know you have anger or fear or what? In fact, how much do you know you have anger or fear right now with the words, or what's anger? Is that less fear, more fear? How much is anger fear? No, I want concrete answers right here. You tell me this, okay? Like, that's a good question. In fact, it's like, well, it's sort of fear, but it's not. Well, actually, emotions can overlap and not with different parts of them. I will tentatively, it's not my entire area, but isn't it all of ours? So anger's sort of fear, but it's sort of not. It's like just because you know words doesn't mean you know your emotions right now, or you're paying attention to what a jerk you're being, speaking to the assistant sensei of the dojo. Doesn't mean anything, does it? No, we're talking about the wider picture. Yes, Karen sensei. So yes. Many animals, again, like dogs and cats, share a bunch of this. Notice, actually, when Wittgenstein talks about a dog can't expect its master Thursday, what that actually shows us the difference between us and the dog. I think we expect the dog to see objects. I think we expect the dog to have emotions similar to ours, and mammals do. Plenty. I'm not trying to cheapen anything, of course. Nor do I think dogs and cats are cheap, depending. I mean, my cats were, and I love them such. And love is cheap. Words even cheaper, it would seem, in this society. Probably any other. Sumerians. They were happy. Probably. That's why I hate them. They're all dead. A dog is interweaving all the pieces together, but not so much words. That's why possibly we like pets, and I love my cats. Plenty. They're actually almost entirely plenty human, except they just lack plenty, what a lot of we wish others would lack plenty, so we can keep talking to ourselves, At least that's how I am. And then the cats are like, I want you caffeinated fool. We need more treats. And I say treats to my cats. They just don't react, you know what I mean? So they don't have that problem, They don't have politics. I mean, they have social arrangements. They just don't have precise institutions. It's somewhat Paul Ziff has a book in the 60s, I always bring up, if I have my hand stuck to a wall like a bad Fluxus performance art piece, and I could say, well, why don't I liberate my hand? But it'd be easier to say I free my hand because it doesn't involve any political processes or texts. I free my hand. To liberate my hand in the French sounds very weird. But freedom and liberation are very much the same thing, just pass through different circuits, different processes. And we hear the word that way. It doesn't pass through the process when it is said because it snaps, and then it feels funny with other things or not. Because logic would involve feeling things fit or not, which would be language interwoven with, for Wittgenstein, words. Wittgenstein is very much about the feelings things fit and the feelings things don't. Could you do math without the feelings things fit or the feeling things don't? No, you couldn't, which means math is not non-emotional. It's just we often pay attention to the form of math rather than the feelings. And if you say, but I can X all that out, yes, we do. And what Wittgenstein would say is, but not only could we, if we did math on plexiglass cubes, it might look entirely different from text or parchment or algebra in the Middle Ages, and then calculus in the Latin, and with Newton. But if we had different emotions, or if you arrange your emotions differently in a way we could, but you haven't yet, like algebra, well, then you would feel about it differently and arrange different life practices. And it's hard to say from in one arrangement or one interweaving, it's not the other, or it doesn't feel like the other, because how would you know other than the difference? You'd have to go through it, or you'd have to at least look at the two and make a judgment call if you could not go through it yourself. Life is asking us to make all those sorts of choices, whether or not they're social, political, or involve cats rubbing your leg. Hey, buddy, how you doing? And of course he flops on the ground because he wants. Yes, he wants to attack. He wants me to play. Hey, buddy. He wants to get entangled with me and his claws. Yes. What's up, buddy? Well, this is almost an hour here. I have been thinking, hey, Val. Okay, he's a bit psyched. I'll let him psych out elsewheres. Yep. So that's about an hour. So what we're going to do here is I am going to, again, thank you for paying such attention. We are slowly working through talks. Again, hopefully you can listen through all of these and work through the lecture notes. I am going to put a lot of hours up, not too many, but I do want to talk through some of these things slowly, and I talk fast, and I still have to talk through things slowly. Again, it's kind of like the turtle, but not. Again, it's motions. And the turtle doesn't make him so fast, does it? No. So what we're going to do is keep going here and interweave things together. And I will get through a bit more of the notes here. I have actually ranted and raved pretty much in what I'm saying in the notes without following them, though. So that's positive, and different. So what we're going to do is I will, again, pick up with another talk and have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are, at what time or space it is. And I will see you if I ever see you.